All right, we got week 3, I believe, of the podcast. Welcome, guys. How are you two doing today?
Good.
Doing good.
Good.
How are you, Taya?
Doing good. Had a fantastic holiday. What about you guys?
Yeah, it was good. It was good. Yeah.
Same. Lots of family. Lots of family
Same.
time.
Love that. Okay, so what we're going to be going over today, I'm just going to kind of recap by states. Brooke's going to go over Soldier Salute because we had some high school girls competing at that college tournament. And then we're going to get into our 2 topics today. Our main one being, cutting weight / dieting and the pros and cons of that in wrestling. And then if we have time, how to get more reps in wrestling because there's kind of a shortage of refs right now. So with that being said, I'll just get right into the by-state results. One thing I wanted to say is that this time of the year is super interesting because of the 2-pound allowance. So people are definitely going to be going down. We're going to see a lot of that this time of the year. And, at by-state, we saw that at 120 with MJ Newman and Kylie Krasuski. I always butcher her name. I'm sorry, Kylie. Both dropping down to 120 from 126. And MJ actually pinned Kylie in the finals of by-state, which I wish I got to see that match because that sounds like it would have been a really good match. Both of them are really high-level wrestlers. So we also had at 126, we had Erica Sleznikau. She was at 132. She was ranked number 8 at 132. She dropped to 126, and she ended up pinning Kit Allsoccer in the finals. And I believe Kit at that time was either 2 or 3 at 126. So Erica is now, ever since dropping into 126, going to be pretty high up in the rankings there. Then we had at 132, we had Carly Chesker, who pinned Natalie Clavetter in the finals. And then what I thought was really cool is Carly actually wrestled 2 times in the span of a couple of days because she also ended up wrestling at the Soldier Salute. So it's a lot of competition for Carly. All right, then 138 was probably arguably the most stacked bracket at this tournament, if not just one of the most stacked brackets, in general for the women's side. We had Delia Collins. She ended up pinning Haley Fletcher in the semifinals. And then Riley Hanrahan, which I believe Riley, this was her first tournament of the season, I think. She beat Delia Collins 7-1 in the finals. So that was interesting. And I just wanted to talk about 138 real quick because right now in the rankings, Carly's number 1, but I believe she's going to be going down to 132. And I'm just interested to see which girls are going to be staying at 138 and which girls are going to be going down to 132 because 38 is pretty stacked right now. Because I know Haley, she started at 132 in the beginning of the season. So I'm just curious, where she's at and if she's going to be bumping down for sectionals and state. Okay. Then almost done with this one at 165, we had Kimura Hutter of Friendship or Adams Friendship. She's currently ranked number 2. She beat Alicia Berg, who also dropped down. Alicia was 4 at 185 pounds the week prior. And then we had Amelia Solstice. I believe her first name is Amelia. She was number 1 at 165 because the week before she pinned Sariana Reinwald at Badger State. But then Christiana Nordstrom ended up beating Amelia. And then Hutter pinned Nordstrom in the finals. And I thought it was really interesting. I saw Kimura pinned her way through the entire weight class. I don't believe any of her matches went over 2 minutes. So that's all I got for by-state. But, yeah, pretty stacked tournament. A lot of ranked girls at that one.
That's awesome. And then moving on to our college tournament, Soldier Salute. I first want to shout out Mateah. She ended up taking first in her bracket, so congrats to you.
Thanks,
and
Brooke.
then we have our high schoolers that competed there, which is really awesome to see them competing at that level already. So Brooke Hoffman, she took third. And then Carly, this was her second tournament of the weekend, right?
Yeah.
She took third as well. Then we have Devlin Albrecht. Albrecht. She took fourth. And then Taylor Whiting took fifth. Madeline Peach took fifth. And Harlow Skinador took fifth. So
Nice.
congrats to those girls for placing. That's super awesome.
Yeah. The girls are really good at the tournament. That's one of the, it's a pretty high level tournament, at least on the women's side of things. So it was just cool to see them all wrestle at that level.
Yeah, super cool.
Okay, so now moving into the topic, and I'm really excited for this one, just the pros and cons of cutting weight. I get a lot of questions in my DMs about this, just how to cut weight right, or if they should. But before we get into this, I want to specify what we mean when we're talking about weight cutting versus diet. And if you guys think, the definition should be different, just let me know and we can try to adjust it before we start the topic. So I was thinking for weight cutting, when I think of weight cutting, it's more of like a rapid weight loss that's mainly water, some fat loss or dieting, but most of the time weight cutting, when people talk about it, it's like water. And then when I think of diet, I think of maintaining a balanced or nutritious eating plan to manage weight. So those are the definitions I came up with. Do you guys think those are good?
Yeah, I think that works. I think that works.
Yeah.
Okay, then who wants to go first with whatever they had for the pros and cons of cutting weight?
So I guess maybe we should have talked about the definition before, because one of the things that I was thinking of is like there really is no pro to cutting weight, like before we defined it, like just like in my mind of like, not dieting. Like obviously if you can diet first and like eat a healthy diet consistently, that's going to be the best way to get down to a weight. Like something that was helpful for me is like macros. So like if you can get down to weight healthily just by eating clean foods versus like processed foods, or like, cut out the junk food, cut out the soda, like that, those kind of things, like that's ideal, especially that's not a super easy thing for the majority of high school athletes to do, because there's junk food everywhere,
Yeah.
So like just in general, just eating a healthy diet, I think is, if you can cut that stuff out, a lot of times you're going to come down kind of faster than what you would expect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with that. I feel like through a whole season, it's hard to cut weight and then be an effective wrestler, especially if you're in a high school season or a college season. When you're wrestling, you're weighing in like 1 to 2 times a week. It's hard to keep like going down, and then especially if you're cutting a lot, that yo-yo effect, I think that causes like a lot of stress on the body, and then makes it harder and harder every single time you have to make weight. So I agree with that, Lauren.
Absolutely. Yeah. Stress and injuries. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Definitely. It's interesting because I was doing research and I found that that dehydration can increase the risk of concussions, which makes sense. Like when I was competing in college, I cut the most weight my sophomore year, and like during that time, I got like a couple concussions, and then they just like kept coming back. And I was looking into why, and it says it's found that the brain is cushioned by a fluid, and it acts as a buffer when there's like trauma to your head. And obviously, when you're dehydrated, there's less of that fluid in your brain, so less of a buffer when you get like hit in the head.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That makes sense. Yeah, I also said, I know you kind of said this, Lauren, but it decreases like the performance level. If you're, especially in like a high school or college, like season, because you're making weight so many times, and like eventually over time you're gonna reduce like your strength sometimes if you're not doing it correctly, endurance, mental clarity. I know there's been a lot of times when like I was cutting weight in wrestling and I don't even remember like driving to the tournament because like I was so just dehydrated. So
yeah,
those are definitely cons of cutting weight if you don't do it correctly.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Like you're talking about, like you don't even remember driving to practice. It takes your focus away from the place that's most helpful, which is learning your skills, learning, your craft. And like, if you look at if you're cutting like a lot of weight, like if you're cutting like a significant amount of weight, your focus in practice is not on technique, and it's not on learning a new skill. It's not on preparing for competition. It's on weight loss. Like that's all you're thinking about the whole practice is, oh man, like, can I lose 3 in this practice? Can I lose 4 in this practice? And then you're like calculating like, well, I wonder if I can get enough off to have a little something to eat or whatever. So your focus is completely not in the place that you need it to be in for the highest performance possible. And then like, and that's in like, and that could be weeks leading up to competition. And then talk about like the night before, you know, when the most helpful thing to be thinking about is strategy and technique, and, you know, what different strategies you want to implement against different opponents and stuff like that. You're also focused on cutting weight. And the only thing you can think about is your first meal after weigh-ins and what you're going to drink. And, you know, that's really where your mind's at. So that is definitely a con of cutting a lot of weight.
Yeah. And then also like going off of like the night before type thing. I know like when you're hungry and you're trying to sleep, it's a lot harder.
Yeah.
And so I remember like so many like sleepless nights. Even like if I don't eat enough like before bed or like after practices, I'm like just rolling, tossing and turning. So like that doesn't help your performance as well. If you are just like thinking about food or like when can I drink my water?
Absolutely. And if you think about those two, like for wrestling, those 2-day weigh-ins, like I remember when they implemented the 2-day weigh-in for like Olympic trials, for like world championships, like, and they did it also at the US Open. So it was like the first time they implemented it. So you would wrestle, and then Mateah, you did this at Soldier Salute too. You have to, after you wrestle, you have to go check your weight and see how much you weigh. And then you have to sometimes go cut weight after you just competed, right? Instead of like going to relax and rehydrate and all the things that you would think that you would want to do after you just fought someone all day, you know? So and sleep, right? But no, you have to go work out more to get back down to the weight. You know, at least at Soldier Salute, you had a pound allowance, right? But like at the US Open, like it's scratch. So like I remember when they first implemented that rule, I like walked off the mat. I made the semifinals. I walked off the mat, and then I had to go cut weight, or I made the finals and I had to go cut weight. And I had to cut weight all night. Like it was like, I don't know what was going on with my weight that time, but I had to like, I cut weight till like 10, and then I tried to sleep, and then I had to like wake up at midnight, and then I had to wake up at 2. It was a rough night, you know? And so like, talk about trying to get your recovery so that you have optimal performance. Like, and weight loss doesn't always come off the same way. It usually doesn't come off the same way. So yeah.
But I don't know, Taya, if you have anything to say. I have another point kind of going off of.
Well, I just wanted to add to the sleep thing, because when I'm like, then when I have to weigh in, like I'm fine being a little bit dehydrated, but the thing that really gets to me, and I can feel it in my performance, is when I didn't get a good night's sleep because I was tossing and turning due to the dehydration. So I think that, you know, and sleep is one of the most important things for athletic performance. I think more than we value it, or more than it deserves more credit than we give it. So I think that's another thing to think about. Like, yeah, your focus is off the night before, but then also your sleep can be so skewed. But yeah, Brooke, what did you have?
Kind of or just what you said, Lauren, it made me think of this, like how you had to wake up like kind of like all night and make sure your weight was good. One pro, I think, of cutting weight that would go off of that is I think that was creating a lot of mental toughness. I don't know if you can say that. Maybe yes, no.
Yeah, no, I would agree, because it's like, Mateah, you were talking about when you said like, oh, if I don't get enough sleep, like I definitely feel it. For me, I was just like, well, let's take some coffee and we're gonna go for it. So like, yeah, just kind of like, cowboy up, and we're gonna do it, you know. So I think it does create that.
I think it does. And I remember like hearing like, I don't remember from who, but they were saying how like a lot of wrestlers are oftentimes like the best in like the workplace, like after like high school and college. And that's because of like that mental toughness that they've created with like that discipline of like cutting weight and managing their diets and stuff like that. So I don't know. That's one pro that I kind of thought of. And Lauren, that story kind of reminded me of that. But
yeah,
that's a good pro.
I have a con that is gonna also bring along a pro.
Wait, can I go along? I need to go off of Brooke's
go.
pro though, because Brooke, I agree. And okay, when I was cutting weight like really hard in college, I wasn't really focused on the competition because Lauren, like you said, I was more focused on just what I'm gonna eat after weigh-ins. But in a way, that really helped me at the point I was at because I was a really nervous wrestler, and so I think I needed something to get my mind off of it. So that actually took my mind off of competition in a way that worked for me during that time. But then also I remember having the mindset when I would go out and wrestle a girl, I would think in my head, like, I cut more weight than she did. I know it. I went through way more than she did to get here. And so in a way, it would just give me more confidence in myself because I know how hard I worked. Although I probably wouldn't go do that again because now I have that confidence or courage in a different way. But during that time, it actually kind of, helped me cowboy up a little bit, like Lauren said.
Yeah.
But and that's an interesting point that you say that, Mateah, because it's like it's what you believed, right? So it ultimately came down to belief. It didn't actually come down to what you were doing. What you were doing created that belief, right?
Yeah.
So maybe it's not actually physically effective, but it was mentally effective. So could you get that result by doing something else?
Definitely.
Yeah. So you don't necessarily need that. It was just a helpful tool at the time, but you've learned more helpful tools.
Definitely.
Yeah.
That's a good way to put it, Lauren.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Okay, so I have another one. Typically, people cut weight for what is the main reason that most maybe it's not the main reason, but sometimes people cut weight because they're running from an opponent, right? So like it's like, oh, I'm running from maybe they're running from an opponent, or maybe like if you think of like an Olympic team or a world team scenario, or even a national title or a state title or things like that. Why do people go certain weight classes? It's because they believe that they can win at that weight class. Maybe they're avoiding someone, but is the focus on another person, or is the focus on this is where I believe I can compete at my best? So I guess I would say to all the athletes out there that are trying to determine what weight class to go to for state or for, nationals or things like that, it would just ask the question, like, where is the weight class that I am most effective as an athlete? And to not consider the other opponents. And I don't mean like consider like at all, you know what I mean? But like to not make the focus so much on another person or on another athlete where you're like in fear of running from that person, or where you're in fear of like making a lineup or stuff like that. Because those are real things that you do have to consider. Mm-hmm. But we shouldn't be like necessarily focusing on too much of another person, but rather focusing on continuing to get better, which maybe to get better, you have to wrestle the hard person in your weight class, and learn from your mistakes rather than run from them by dropping down 2 weight classes or 3 weight classes or whatever.
That's good. Lauren, what about if you have a coach who is like making you go down for the lineup? What would you do in that case?
Have a conversation with them. Okay. I guess, man, it's hard because what age group are we talking about?
Well, I mean, I don't know, probably like high school, because I've had high schoolers like come to me about that too.
Yeah, so their coach is like making them go down. So I guess like maybe just have a conversation with the coach to better understand what their game plan is for having you go down. You know what I mean? And to better understand, because you want to be able to, trust your leaders, and, you want to be able to trust your leaders and your coaches, right? But you also have to be able to have those conversations for clarity so that you can better understand what they're asking you to do. It's not, it shouldn't always just be like, because I said so and I know it's best. It's sometimes that's the answer. You know what I mean? But it should be a conversation as to like, hey, if you go down, here's why, and it kind of explained to you why their thinking is to have you go down 2 weight classes, because maybe it's different than what you thought it was. Or maybe it can help you better understand, or, because a lot of times when people, athletes just start the sport, they won't lose a pound. They think a pound is too hard, so like, hey, it's just a pound, actually you sweat a pound off in practice, so, so hear the coach out and just have a conversation so that you can better understand what their goal is.
That's good.
Yeah. Maybe if they're having you cut 20 pounds, that might not be the best idea.
That's true. Okay, wait. Does anyone else have anything? Because I have a scenario where I think it's okay to like cut weight,
I
but
have a
mainly,
couple. I probably agree with you. Yeah, we'll see what you say because I have scenarios too.
yeah. Well,
I
like
have one too. Yeah.
so the scenario that, well, okay, I think it's different for different levels. I think on the senior level, it's a little bit different because we have to make weight maybe like 4 or 5 times a year. Really cut maybe just a couple, especially because like some of the tournaments you get a 2 kilo allowance. But I think it's obviously different for high schoolers because they're having to weigh in like 20 to 30 times in a season in a 4 month span. So it's like two completely different animals. So times where I think it's fine is if, well, Fargo is 3 months out, or if World Team Trials is 3 months out, like start getting your weight down now. And you can do it in a way where you're not really feeling it that much at practice and it's not unhealthy. Like there is ways where you can do it. And I think, I think there is times where it's actually just a good idea. Maybe if like you're going for a Fargo title, just starting getting your weight down now. I think that's a scenario that I had.
I definitely agree with that. Like if you're trying to make a Fargo team, if you're trying to make a world team, an Olympic team, like for sure, like you want to go at what you're going to be most competitive at. So I think those are, definitely good times to cut weight as well. Going along with that, something that I think is important to know is to know yourself. So like when you're cutting weight like that, to know yourself, something that's going to help you best is like you talked about, like if you can get down by healthy eating and using macros really help me to use macros to come down or whatever, where you're just like eating and then you only have to get off 3 or 4 or 5 pounds in water weight, so that you're closer to your weight and then like the cut is less. But knowing yourself, so like knowing and Mateah, you're good at this, like knowing how much you can like sleep off or how much you can like float, knowing like, oh, I'm good for this much, like over the night, like I'll float this much, and then like you can calculate that weight. And then also like knowing like how much you can lose in a practice, and you can just start weighing yourself, before and after practice, just so you get a read on like and learn how much you can lose in a practice. And then you can even narrow it down to like, then you can eventually feel it, like, oh, I sweated off, I know, you can feel it, like, oh, this was 2 pounds, so just like tracking it and better knowing yourself as an athlete. Because one of the things in weight cut that you don't want to do is you don't want to, I've seen athletes before cut too much weight to where like, they're 5 pounds under then, or like 3 pounds. And it doesn't happen super, super often. Right. But they cut more than what they needed. Like, and they're like, oh, I want to be able to eat dinner. I wanted this and that. But then they step on the scale and they're like 3 or 5 pounds light, which is like, we didn't need to put that extra stress on our body before a big competition and before we went out there and competed, because now maybe we're sore, maybe we depleted too much out of the tank. So being able to have that balance where like, yourself, how much you can lose, how much you can sweat, and you get that right amount of time. Yeah. And then also doing the smart things to cut weight too. Like, maybe you don't do like the stair stepper. Maybe that just kills your legs before a competition. Then you have dead legs the next day. But doing some of the easier things that are going to help you get the weight off. Like I know some people like to wrestle, some people don't beforehand. So sauna, just like smaller things that is going to be less taxing on the body.
Mm-hmm. I know for me, going back to my sophomore year, I would cut basically all my weight on the Airdyne bike and wrestling. And then when I went back to wrestling and I cut weight now, I do not like to wrestle to cut weight. Obviously, I'm going to practice, but my practice, I never want it to be focused around weight cut. And so when I'm cutting weight, then I do it on the elliptical or sauna, but I know it's illegal for high schoolers and college students in NCAA to use a sauna. But I like to compartmentalize, that's how you say it, compartmentalize the two, where I'm like, okay, now it's time to wrestle, or now it's time to just get water weight off. And doing that has really helped me, because I used to like really stress myself out. Brooke, this happened when you and I were wrestling each other one time.
Yeah.
Like you just start to mentally like freak out, at least for me, when I would cut weight while wrestling, because I literally would just not be focused on what I was doing. And then I was developing bad form at the same time because I was extremely exhausted while wrestling. And that's just, I don't know. I didn't like that.
And that's so interesting because what's a what? Brooke? What'd you say?
No, I just think that's really smart to compartmentalize the keeping like wrestling practice as wrestling practice, and that's where you're learning, and then devoting some other form to help you cut weight. And I don't know, that's like really smart thing to do. Because I remember, like, I would just, like, kind of not, like, after, like, wrestling season, I would just, like, be like, I can't wrestle just for, like, a little bit because I was, like, so sick of cutting weight, and that's just, like, what I associated my wrestling practice with for so long. So
that's fair. That's fair. And I completely understand like what you guys are coming from and what you guys are saying, but like not all athletes are the same. So some athletes, and I've seen this, and I've done it before myself, like wrestling the day before or wrestling to cut off the weight. Some people enjoy doing that and like doing it because it's a form of play. And they think of it as like, oh, I don't have to run sprints. I rather wrestle. I rather play through my positions and have a good time because I love wrestling and I enjoy what I'm doing. And I just want to play through the positions and just kind of spar lightly. And then they're like, boom, then the weight's off, you know? And like, I have done that before, but I will say I also don't love to wrestle to cut weight either. I have done it. But a lot of people do enjoy it. And so I think there's just different athletes and people just have different perspectives on it.
That's true. And what I think is important in general is just the athletes. Sometimes we think we need to do things because everyone else is doing it, but it's like just to know that there's different ways of doing things. And especially when it comes to cutting weight, it's like you need to get the weight off, just figure out the way that works the best for you. And I don't know, I don't think it needs to be a certain way, which I agree with that, Lauren.
Yeah.
Brooke, you can go.
Just another thing, I know, like, in college, we used to actually, like, play handball and just layer up, and then, like, we would start sweating, and, like, that's how, like, we got off the weight in, like, a fun way.
Yeah.
So there are, like, a lot of different ways to do it.
When I was in college, we had a lot of girls that like to dance. So we just layered up and we would really just have like a dance practice or like a Zumba. Like we would just like literally someone's leading the class and we would just all dance and follow that person. I'm not joking.
That's fun. That's so funny.
This is like. So it was fun. And so like there's fun ways to do it for sure. It's like you said, Mateah, just figuring out what works best for you.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Lauren, I remember that's kind of what you helped me with at senior world team trials when I was like really anxious cutting weight. You would just like made it fun and kind of made me realize like just because it physically sucks, it doesn't mean that you can't emotionally or like intellectually be having fun. Like sometimes when things are hard, we allow our brain to go there too, but it doesn't have to go to that bad spot. And that's what I realized.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm glad. And yeah, I remember too, like, being at like the Olympic Training Center, like with, some of my friends like, oh, we're just hanging out. We're all doing the same thing. We're all hanging out in the sauna or, oh, we're working out together. Just, it's cutting weight is fun. Don't do it.
We don't condone
I don't
it.
encourage this. Yeah.
Yeah. I had another point, but I forgot it. Does anyone else have anything on this topic?
I guess the cons, like, not to get too morbid here, but people have died cutting weight. Probably one of the worst ways to die, but I mean, it has happened. So
yeah, that is true.
It's something to keep in mind too. It's not that it can't happen. It has literally happened in the past. So
I wonder like what it feels like, or if because there's been times where I'm cutting weight, like when I did it the bad way and when I was cutting too much where I felt close to that, but I wonder how like you don't know when to stop.
I don't know. I guess when you're rolled up in a hot mat, I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah. I don't know. I never thought that I was actually going to die. I just always thought that this sucks, but I never thought I was actually going to die. But how do we transition from that?
Oh wait, yeah, I have one point that's not as dark, I guess. I remember being at nationals and it was a 2-day tournament and it was like cutting weight the whole year and I was so sick of it that I was in the blood round match, and a thought that went through my head in that match was, if I lose this, I don't have to make weight tomorrow. And my body was trying to convince me to lose the match, which I ended up just overriding it and still winning the match. But just the fact that that's where my head was really shows a lot, because I was definitely focused on something I shouldn't have been. But then again, I also get it because I was so sick of cutting weight. And I think that's what it does to so many people and like deter so many people from wrestling, because you just get sick of cutting weight. No one really wants to do it that much. And, but yeah, I just thought that was an interesting thought. And I still remember that.
Yeah, I would agree. And then I think we already talked about this. I don't know, about how the people being sick of cutting weight, but then also how, injuries are more prevalent when you cut weight like that, especially over and over and over again, how it's easier to get injured.
Yeah.
I think we talked about that a little bit with the dehydration part of it.
Yeah.
Well, that's all I got for that topic. Anyone else before we move on?
Nope.
No?
No?
I think so.
All right. So the topic Lauren came up with this one is how do we get more refs in the sport of wrestling? And one thing that I forgot who I was talking to, but they were telling me why there's more Friday girls tournaments this year. Was it you, Lauren?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, so why there's more like Friday tournaments for girls this year is because they didn't have enough refs to do like the boys and the girls tournaments on Saturdays. So I thought that was an interesting little fact.
Maybe coaches too, huh? Maybe the coaches as well, because coaches can't be two places at once.
Yeah, that's true. And some of the girls teams are coached by the same people as the men's or the boys.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I have a lot for this subject, so if someone else wants to start, you guys can, because I actually have kind of a lot for this one.
Okay, cool. Well, I have one idea to host some sort of an event where people can like learn. So this is an idea to get more people into reffing, is to host an event where people can learn how to ref, but then there's wrestling matches that they can ref, and then they wouldn't, because I feel like a lot of refs don't want to get into it because of the fear of being maybe yelled at by coaches, and no one really wants that to happen. So if they had some sort of event where you could learn how to ref, and then you could like try it out in matches, and then they would have like different types of training there. That was an idea.
That's a good idea. I guess you would have to have like some sort of like scrimmage, or you know what I mean? It would be most beneficial if it was like a scrimmage, maybe, like, because it couldn't just be practice for the refs. But it's so interesting because I was actually talking to a ref about this. It doesn't matter what level it is, even if it's a scrimmage, like somebody has to be wrestling, right? So even if they're practice matches, it's still going to feel like the Olympics to them. So I talked to a ref today, and this is who I got. Actually, I talked to several refs, but one of them is the main ref that I got this information from. And he's actually a category UWW1 ref. So what that means is he is one level under Olympic category. So he's pretty high up in the reffing tier of what he does, right? So that's who I got most of this information from. But like one of the things that he said that I thought was a great point was he mentioned that it doesn't matter what level you're wrestling. It could, because I told him, I ref before at a camp, and Mateah, I know you did it as well. And I was like, it was awful because literally it's a lose-lose situation. Everyone's yelling at you. You can't make a good call. There's no such thing as a good call because a good call is expected. So like, good job. You did what you're supposed to do.
That's so true.
So you only get hammered, and from both sides, from making the wrong call. So I was like, yeah, man, it was just this camp. I just refed at this like camp basically as a camp tournament. And he's like, it doesn't matter what level it is. To them, it's the Olympics. To them, it's a world championships. I'm like, that's so true. So it doesn't matter if it's a youth tournament. It doesn't matter if it's a scrimmage, right? People are still going to take it super seriously because they're still wrestling live and they're still competing like, against each other. So like, Mateah, I think that's a great idea, but I think it's still hard to get that practice in for them because everyone's still going to take it super serious.
Well, what if you did like, okay, everyone knows this event is for refs, and then you'd be like, we need wrestlers for this event to teach new refs. So just tell people the calls aren't going to be great. But Lauren, I remember when I refed at your camp that the girls were laughing the whole time. Like, you know what I mean?
I think that's because that was a different environment. And I don't think that was all the girls. I think that was two girls that were actually scared to wrestle each other. So they didn't want to actually compete against each other. I know exactly who you're talking about. They were scared to wrestle each other is what it was. So they didn't actually go out there and try.
Yeah.
That's my opinion. But
you know what I mean? So I think that there's times you could try to take the pressure off, or maybe no parents allowed in the,
or coaches, you think?
Yes. If it was a coach's clinic, it was a coach's clinic maybe, and you had some young coaches wrestle, so the coaches themselves could better understand the rules and the position. So maybe making the coaches wrestle each other,
You think they would?
I don't know, depends on the coaches.
True. Yeah.
Maybe
But-
not if you have like a 70-some-year-old coach. Although there's a lot of masters guys that are killing it. So
yeah. That was funny.
yeah, but I think that is a good idea in the right direction, getting them like practice opportunities, because if you think of it like how you learn wrestling technique, right, is like you learn a new move, you're exposed to a new move, and then first you have to get it down by drilling it, right? And then once you like drill it, you have it at the drill level, and then you get it at the spar level, and then maybe sometimes it fails at the spar level, so that means you just need to drill it more, right? And then all of a sudden you're doing great on the drilling, and then you can spar it better, and then you go live, right? But these refs, they're just thrown into a live situation all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And then you think of rules and how constantly they're always changing rules. We just implemented a 3-point rule, the 3-point takedown. So like constantly implementing new rules, constantly updating. They have to be able to have time to stay updated on them too. And then they don't get practice to update them. They're just like kind of thrown into like a live scenario and expected to hit it 100% perfect.
Mm-hmm. And then they never, you're right, Laura, like they never get congratulated for doing a good job because they're just expected to do that. And we expect them to never make mistakes, which is like, yeah, that's never going to happen.
Yeah. So I would say just have it as a coach, and, maybe people watching too, because I don't ever hear people in the crowd say, that was a great call, ref. Everyone's like, that was a terrible call, like,
True.
So I guess maybe as an athlete, as a coach, as a parent, as a person in the stands, just in general, have grace for the refs. And like, I think also like as people in general, we could probably have more grace for other people just as a whole, but like specifically like having more grace for people. And then like a lot of times people criticize, the hardest critics in things are people who haven't done those things. Like the people who criticize you the most are people who have never done them. So like if you think the ref should be doing a better job, maybe you should try reffing yourself. And then that'll automatically give you more grace for them, because I've done it. It sucks, and it does make me check my language sometimes with the referees. Even if I don't agree with a call, I don't have to be disrespectful about it.
Yeah. And I agree with all that, Lauren, but going off of it, sometimes I genuinely have questions for refs. And when it's like, you can tell that they're yelled at so much because of how they respond. Like they're very short, but they almost have to be, or kind of like aggressive, because they're so used to people giving them a hard time that it makes it hard when you actually have a genuine question too.
Yeah. Well, and that's another thing. I think a lot of times in the corner, they say like the question, whenever you like throw the brick or you challenge a call, it should be addressed to the referees in the form of a question. And it not always is, like a lot of times people will be like, those were our points, or that was our move, or stuff like that. Whereas like when you challenge something, it should be like, I'm challenging this position, or I'd like to challenge that. We had 4 points on that, or, you know what I mean? It should, from where I was standing, I seen 4. Yeah, that's not even a question, but like, I'm like, that's a statement. But it should be phrased in the form of a question. You know what I mean? Like when you're talking,
like, wasn't
to the
that 4? That sounded aggressive. I just realized.
It did sound aggressive, but that's what I mean, because that's how we're used to talking to them.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But
Wow.
It should be when you approach, or when you throw in the brick, things should be in the form of a question.
Okay.
Versus like, those were our points. So, but I agree with you, Mateah. Like, I have felt like they're automatically not receptive to you, and they're already ready to crush you from the beginning, because of all the backlash they've received all day. People just on them all day. And then like when you have like a genuine question, and then maybe a good time to ask that is after the match.
Yeah. So. Not while they're in the middle of reffing.
But sometimes you have to ask it in the middle of reffing, because it affects the score.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes you have to, in order to change the score. We had a situation in your finals match
Oh yeah.
where they what it was is they awarded you a 4 and then a 2, and then they never put that 2 up on the board, and the referee later tried to add it in, like, I don't know, like what, like a minute later or 2 minutes later, a minute and a half later or something, and the other corner was like super upset about it because he thought he was just awarding you 2 out of nowhere. So I don't know if he thought those 2 got white paddled or what, but like, and then we had to wait for like, what, it was like 10
It was
minutes.
so long.
It was 10 minutes.
It was
No,
so long.
it was a
'cause
long
we
time.
were waiting.
It wasn't 10 minutes. I'm over exaggerating, but it was a long time.
I thought I like missed the rest of your match. Like I
Did
was
he-
like, I swear if because they like switched over to the guys like when you're watching it on TV.
Did they really?
And then and they were just
good.
like full screen of the guys. And then I was like, where's
What-
Taya? Like, and then all of a sudden they split it back up again. I was like, okay, thank you.
Yeah.
No, and did they even use their brick for that, Lauren?
No, because I didn't stop it. The referee caught it. So they didn't use the brick. So no one threw the brick no one threw the challenge block. What it was is the referee awarded you another point another 2 points because I think you got a takedown, and then he goes, the score should be 8-0. And
But I just didn't know if like, sorry, this is off topic, but did the ref did her corner have to throw the brick in order for them to look back on it, or no? Since it was like a technical mistake.
No, because they didn't have to throw so when you throw the brick, it's a challenge. You're challenging a call that the referee made. And the referee is the one who stopped it, and the guy said no. You know what? I don't know if he threw the brick or not.
Yeah,
I thought he just
you
approached
threw the
the
brick,
table.
Lauren.
He did throw the brick? Okay.
No, I thought you did.
No.
That's what we thought. Because we noticed you didn't get your 2, or Taya, and then we just assumed that it was stopped because you threw it.
No, the referee noticed it. Yeah.
Interesting.
Which we knew because actually Taylor was in the corner with me, and she's like, hey, we didn't get our 2. And I was like, okay. And we just kind of like, I mean, we knew that. We just paid attention. I just thought they were just slow getting it up there, and then the referee realized that they just didn't put it up there. So, yeah, I thought they were just like, anyway, back to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wait. Okay. Sorry. Okay. I just have one more thing to say. Is that I think a lot of the issues are solved by having the 3 refs in freestyle, and having the ability to throw a challenge block with the amount of people that are yelling at refs. Because if you have 3 refs like making the decision, I think there's less people yelling in freestyle. But then also it would be very difficult to have that for folk style and for all like the youth tournaments.
Yeah. So it's interesting because initially I would want to agree with you with that being said, but the referee that I talked to today, he had a different perspective.
Really?
Yes. And his perspective is that so this is what he said. I wrote it down. He said, we're kind of at a crossroads right now where the old generation is like ready or has already retired. And they taught guys like this particular referee that I'm talking about how to handle and diffuse situations with aggressive coaches, where the generation after them strictly uses like the video review or relies on that three-man reffing, and those younger referees who referee these events without video review, they're lost and they can't articulate themselves and why they scored and what happened. So they're having trouble articulating because of the video review. And I know not everyone starts out at that level or starts out like learning from or doing freestyle or things like that. But that is something that is happening, in the freestyle world. And that's a point that this referee brought up. So like when coaches argue with them, they can't articulate themselves because they've relied so heavily on their video review.
Dang, that's an interesting point.
Yeah.
I never thought about that.
Yeah. Perspective from a referee.
Yeah. Kind of reminds me of, I like how you did that, Lauren. It reminds me of how we're all used to just being on our phones so much that our generation isn't as good with communication in person. And it's almost the same thing. Like technology is so good, but then it can also be detrimental to humans in social interactions specifically.
True.
For sure.
True.
Yeah.
But in the regard to like folk style, like I don't know that necessarily comes into play with folk style, because there's not there's video reviews at like the NCAA, Division I level, but like, at a high school tournament, there's not a video review.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So,
that's true. Don't you think there would be less arguing if there was 3 refs? Because then it would just be more accurate in general, so less coaches would be yelling at refs.
say that again.
So if they had 3 refs, even in folk style, like they do in freestyle, don't you think there would be less people yelling at refs? Because the refs would then be almost more efficient or more accurate because there's 3 of them.
Yeah. I don't know that I necessarily agree that there would be less yelling at refs, because there's still a high amount of people yelling at refs in freestyle, even though there's 3 of them. Now they all have to agree on a point. And maybe they all have different perspectives on things, and they have other people to back them up so they can feel backed instead of like, it maybe in folk style, maybe the referees feel like there's 2 against 1, and maybe they feel more backed up, but like, I don't think that would eliminate coaches from yelling at referees any less. It's probably the same amount, but so I don't know that does away with that part of it.
I just thought maybe it would decrease it. I don't know.
It hasn't in freestyle that I've noticed. I don't know.
Yeah. Maybe we could run a study. A case study. Yeah. That's all I have for the whole referee thing. Do you have anything else, guys?
Yeah, I have a couple. So again, this referee had mentioned that like position is key. So where you are in reference, which makes sense, right? Like what you see, where the angle of the camera, the angle of the referee, the angle of the coaches. So like what the coach sees versus what the referee sees could be different, and so like the position, it doesn't mean that the action that happened is different because we're all watching the same thing, but your point of reference is a little bit different. So where you on the mat kind of makes a difference. So like keeping that in mind with the referees and like your positioning, maybe you've seen something they didn't, maybe they've seen something you didn't. So again, when you address the refs, to have like your thoughts in the form of a question versus, anything else.
That made me think of an idea. Can I share it real quick?
Yeah.
Okay, so what if in the future the mat on every corner had a camera and then it was attached to an AI and the AI was the ref? Like artificial intelligence. I think that might happen at some point because it would be so accurate.
Sounds expensive. So if it does, it would probably only be at elite tournaments, in competitions. I don't know that your local high school tournament would be able to afford one.
But who knows if it just like becomes so mainstream that it's kind of cheap because that's the way technology works. I don't know. I'm calling it. There's going to be AI refs.
Okay. Just like anything else, I'm sure they'll still make mistakes.
That's true. Anyway, okay, sorry.
No, and I think we kind of addressed this one too, but like the younger athletes, then when they get yelled at, they're as just anyone in general, more apt to quit by getting yelled at. Like no one likes being yelled at. And if you, again, I know we're taking like heavy perspective on like referee side here with a lot of things, but like there is no full-time refereeing job. Like most of the referees are either retired or they're, doing it on their weekends, like, so they have another job that they're working. Sometimes they have to get off or like for work in order to come referee an event. So like, it's not necessarily like downtime for them, so like, I guess, again, as coaches and spectators, just having grace for them because like that is their time that they're giving up to come and referee an event. But like ideas on how to keep them a little bit more is like organizations like, and this is from that referee that I talked about that's a UWW level 1. And he had mentioned like having organizations like USOWA, or an organization that backs the referee. And so like, and another one was like the Great Lakes Officials Organization, where they help education and helped with a mentor-menteeship. So like where referees mentor other referees, and just having a program where communication is like, there's a lot of communication and just like helping give those. Like you think about coaches and athletes, like athletes have coaches, that's their mentorship program. But like referees, unless you're like connecting with someone, they don't have that. So like maybe something where you're involved in a mentorship program would be a helpful thing to help educate the refs and then like help them better understand what's going on too.
That's another great idea.
That'd be a really good idea.
Yeah. And then like also that's encouraging, personal development too. Like you're continuing to grow in the thing that you're doing, which would be refereeing. And then like, again, if you think about anything else, like, as technology, you just mentioned technology is constantly updating. Well, so are the rules. And we talked about that a little bit too. They're constantly updating. So if you're in a mentee mentorship program, like constantly learning the rules, staying up on the rules and stuff like that. Someone else, another referee, I talked to 2 referees today. Another referee mentioned having like in Mateah, you brought it up too, but incentives or awards like for the referees to encourage them to do what they're doing, because like they are giving up a lot of time, sometimes money, resources, they don't get paid a whole lot. They're doing a lot of travel. Sometimes they're taking time off of work, all that stuff. But like something that's going to encourage them to keep doing what they're doing. And one of the referees mentioned gear. I was like, that's true. Everybody loves getting gear, as coaches, as athletes, like we all love getting gear. Why wouldn't referees love getting some free gear too?
Yeah.
So that's, maybe that's a little incentive. And then another idea to continue like growth of referees is like getting them involved at an early age. So at like a high school or college age, just getting them involved in like, this was actually an idea from someone else quite a while back that I had talked to, where it's like, high school tournaments, sometimes they, like an open tournament, they would get their entry fee paid for by reffing. So like you get your entry paid for if you ref some matches or something like that, or you've got to work a couple hours after, or whatever. Although I think it would be hard to do like to ref and to focus on competing at the same time, but maybe you're a high school athlete and there's a youth tournament going on that, at the same time or right after, and you can compete in your high school tournament and then ref the youth tournament or something like that, but where you're paying to play basically.
Oh, cool.
They actually do that in our jiu-jitsu tournaments.
Oh, nice.
Like you can sign up to like help out and ref, and then I think like there's like a jiu-jitsu tournaments are like high like entry fees, so like you don't have to pay for that entry fee, and then you just like they give you like the however much time you're competing off, so you like start reffing the beginning and then end the day reffing. But so that is a good idea, because I know a lot of like younger athletes do take that up.
Nice.
And in a way that almost will get people into it too. Like someone might start with that and then they'll be like, oh, I actually really like reffing, and then they'll keep reffing. So that's also a good idea.
Yeah. And then, you guys know college athletes are like always looking for ways to make money too, so like going to ref, if you're in college, going to ref a local high school tournament just to make a little bit of money. And as a college and high school athletes, being a ref is going to better help you learn and understand the rules. Like you might know the rule, but understanding the application of the rule is a little bit different, because if you think of the perspective, like during a wrestling match, the perspective of the athlete and the goal of the athlete is different than the perspective of the coach. And that's different than the perspective of the referee. Like we're all watching the same match, but everyone has a different perspective. Wow. The athlete competing is thinking, what am I going to do to this other athlete? The coaches are like, how can I help my athlete better understand what's happening, what's about to happen, the flow of things, right? And then the referee is like, how am I going to score the action that just happened? And they have to do it immediately in that moment. And they don't really have too much time to think about it. Whereas observers and coaches, we get time to think about what just happened in that action because the referee is calling it in real time.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Honestly, referees are very impressive.
Yeah, I know. I was just telling you, if you rag on referees, which I do sometimes too, not like I don't agree with the calls. I will say that I don't agree with the calls, but I have a lot of respect for them, because like if you try refereeing, it is not easy. Someone's always mad at you. It's not a fun position to be in. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
Lauren, thanks for talking to those referees. That was such good information.
It was fun because I learned some of this stuff too. I didn't think about the video review being both helpful and harmful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I never thought of that either.
Yeah.
That's so good. No. Anything else?
No. Support
That's
your
awesome.
local referees.
Oh yeah, if you're a ref and you're listening, we're very thankful for you.
That's right.
You're awesome.
Yes, they literally couldn't be wrestling. We wouldn't have
Yeah.
competitions without them. So.
Yeah, that's true.
All right. I think that's good. I'm ready to wrap it up if you guys are for today. One more thing, if we still have people listening, we are looking for topics or different things that you guys want us to debate or discuss. So you guys can either email Wisconsin Wrestle or DM us on Instagram. It's Queen of the Mat Podcast, or at any one of our Instagrams if you guys have it, for ideas for the podcast. But we'll be back next week. All right. Bye, guys.
Bye.